Thank you all for attending this panel on animation, because today, as you see, it's Animation Day. So the question today is animation, the flagship of European co-production. And joining me on stage to talk about that, we have Carole Kremer at Film from Luxembourg. Hello. Virginie Nouvel, Managing Director of Walimage. And Navina Sata, board member of the European Film Academy.
Hello. Hi.
Hi. So my first question, and I swear it would be the only one where you have to talk one after the other for a long time, is can you perhaps say a few words about your institutions and maybe the support for animation that your institution allow? So you want to start, Virginie?
I have some slides, maybe?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So, hi everybody. Very happy to be there today to talk about animation. So I'm Virginie from Walimage. Walimage is the economic fund from Wallonia to support the audiovisual and the video game industry. So first of all, I have to let you know where is Wallonia. It's the south part of Belgium, so the south region, the French-speaking part, but excluded Brussels, which is a capital and has its own region. So we work on this territory to help the audiovisual and the gaming industry to grow and to develop. And to do that, we have 4 different types of activities. First of all, through Walimage co-productions, we invest in audiovisual projects, so future film, series, it can be fiction or animation, but also a dedicated product to the format industry. We invest about 6.5 million per year in about 50 different type of projects. Through Walimage Entreprise, we finance companies as a long-term partner, financial partner. So we can invest as a shareholder or as a lender in different type of companies which works on the audiovisual or on the gaming industry. With Walimage Tournage, we manage a film commission with a team of 4 people. And Walimage Gaming invests in gaming projects, so video games, in the same principle as Walimage co-production, so regarding the amount of expenses that this project do on the radio, on Wallonia. And so we manage an amount of 2 million euros per year through this department. If I talk about animation. For the animation industry, we can consider that we have 3 types of actions. Of course, we finance audiovisual projects, so animation projects, but we also finance animation studios, often via equity, so as a shareholder, and we are convinced that the action we have on the video games industry, it's also thankful to the animation industry, because both of these industries are going to be more and more involved right now, and these 2 markets are linked. So right now the animation studio have to think about the video game market on their strategy. And that's it for me.
Thank you, Virginie. Carole, can you tell us more about Film from Luxembourg?
Hello. I have not prepared the presentation, so I'll come up with this off the top of my head, but I'll try and be as complete as possible.
And it will be very easy because all eyes are on you. So yeah, that's
perfect.
Nice. No pressure.
Exactly what I want.
Yeah.
So yes, Film Fund Luxembourg is based in Luxembourg, so I'll also say a couple of words about where we are. We are right next to Wallonia, very much at the heart of Europe, a small country, small territory, but with, I would say, an interesting funding opportunities for any kind of audiovisual content, including animation. We are a public fund, 100% public, so financed by taxpayers' money. And we are under the auspices of the Ministry of Culture and the Ministry for Communications and Media, so it's like a double patronage, let's say. We were set up in 1991, so compared to some of the other public funds that many of you will be familiar with, we are still quite young. So one of our mandates is, of course, to fund co-productions with Luxembourg, but also to make sure that the industry that we have locally can develop in a sustainable way, and that we actively contribute to making it bigger and more diverse and really making it a part of the Luxembourg business ecosystem, let's say. The money that we give is all selective, so unlike our neighbor, we do not have any automatic funding, for example, or tax incentive. It's all selective funding and all based on evaluations that are carried out by a selection committee. We operate with usually 4 deadlines a year, and you get a decision within 2 months, and you need a Luxembourg co-producer to apply. So the first step, if you're interested in co-producing with us, is to contact some Luxembourg-based producers or to come and find us, and we will give you more information about where you can find us. For example, we will have a stand at MIFA, so if you're in Annecy, you can come and find us there, and we're happy to give you more information about all the intricate details of our funding schemes at MIFA, for example, or here in Cannes. We're at number 129, if you want to come and find us here. We support all formats, so that's of course feature, shorts, but also newer formats like XR, for example, series in animation, but also live action. And we are based on a system that's a reimbursable advance on receipts, which is very similar to what the CNC does, for those of you who are familiar with that. And yeah, we do co-produce quite a lot of animation. We have 2 animated features here in Cannes this year, and we have 6 animated works in selection at Annecy this year, so we're very happy about that. And we do a lot of minority co-productions, so if you're interested in that, I would say come and talk to me or talk to one of my colleagues here in Cannes or at one of the other markets. I think we can leave it at that.
Thank you, Carol. And last but not least, Nevina, talking about the European Film Award and what is the European Film Award?
Well, the European Film Academy,
not award. Yeah, I'm already on stage.
It is the organization that puts together, most of the European professionals, talents, and producers into an umbrella organization that basically, on one hand, promotes European cinema globally. By organizing various events. Probably the most known event throughout the year is the European Film Award, and that is a ceremony this year actually is going to take place in Switzerland, which is also Cannes' focus country, and it promotes also co-production naturally by putting together events that, starting from the awareness that the European cultural heritage has communities, places, and incredible, films and talent attached, can actually generate a very interesting revenues. So we are mostly on, on the promotion side of the connection, the networking, and the other fantastic activity that has been growing, looking at all the possible languages and genres, of course, is an attention for the youngest audience members and the youngest members of the organization. As you can imagine, a lot of networking organizations look at established professionals, where one necessity that we have in Europe is to collect better energy and much stronger investment for those that are at the beginning of their careers. Reason why it's crucial that you connect with us. Of course, EFA is the website where you can understand how to join and ask to become a member. It is, I think, for my experience, mostly for those that do animation, a great opportunity also to connect multi-generational producers. And, you basically get attached to a level of talent that is unique. Last but not least, this year, we have the new president, who is Juliette Binoche. And so we are starting a completely new activity and promotion with her. And it's going to be very interesting to see how we can combine a very strong desire of unifying a strong European voice with incredible talent, which is already in the room.
Thank you very much. And well, first question, now you can talk with each other, not one after another. I'm done with that. So why do you think animation is the kind of cinema that triggers the most co-production, even more than live action? Why do you think that, in your experience?
I start. So Belgium is very strong in co-production for live action and for animation, thanks to the combination of the tax shelter, which is a national incentive, an automatic one, and the fund like us, with a selective mechanism. So thanks to this mechanism, you can reach about 50 to 60% of financing for your Belgian expenses, which is huge. So we are very competitive on an international market. And it's more strong for the animation because the high budget. And so in animation, we co-produce a lot with Denmark, Finland, and other European countries. But I have to say that our main partner is France. We co-produce a lot with France. And it works very well to combine the French tax credit and the Belgian incentive. Actually, if you want to combine both these systems, you have to locate about 65 to 70% of your production in France, and so you can locate about 25 to 30% of your production in Belgium. And so it's very interesting for the Belgian studios and, of course, for the Walloon studios. That's why we co-produce a lot.
Definitely, animation is the quintessential co-production hub. Budgets are very big and the work is extended in time. So you need to squeeze as much as you can out of a very strong intellectual property. You need to work in teams that can, build a trust and a capacity of reciprocity and investment that lead to more than one project. Otherwise, it's really such a big investment, right, in time and effort. And the other element that we find fascinating is that through animation, you can really unify places that are so distant and apparently culturally different, but then can be, extremely personalized through the packaging of the dubbing. And in general, it's the best pool to do talent scouting, discover new incredible visions and poetics. So for Europe, this is absolutely the characteristic. And when you look at the European animation, there was a very strong connection with the co-production also through public broadcasting, which was, one of the main activities mostly oriented to under-18 animation. Today, clearly the platforms have generated a possibility of a global co-production. So it's very easy to imagine that you're going to break down this, budget into pieces and opportunities also for reaching audiences that are very far from your own country.
Carole?
Yeah, I would say, a number of things that have already been said, including the fact that it may sound a bit strange to say that it's partly because it travels well that you also co-produce more, but I think that's partly what it is, that dubbing makes international distribution easier and also makes the works more profitable, which of course in turn will also generate, I think, more demand to actually produce and therefore co-produce that kind of work, because the market is there, basically. But I think it's perhaps partly also by design, with the animation workflow and the work split that you can carry out. it's perhaps easier to do that between countries because you can more clearly separate certain stages of production between different territories, also where the individual strengths lie, which of course in live action is different because you need to look for certain sets, you need to look for, whereas you have that different flexibility, I think, that the work split in animation brings. And maybe also, but perhaps this is slightly newer, but now always by design, animation was always fast to adopt to this digital environment, and this international collaboration is easier when you can do it digitally. I think we all see that on a daily basis, and probably even more so since COVID. And I think that also encourages this, let's say, co-production spirit, or it's easier because you can do it digitally partly, or you have different options that live action, of course, do not have because the requirements to shoot are different, etc.
You wanted to add something? Because I saw you doing that with your hand.
This is so true, and look at what happened with COVID. You know, production for animation in COVID got a spike up. There was the confirmation that it can be done from anywhere. You generate hubs by generating talent, so training is, of course, a key element. Even the most remote region can determine a very strong animation capacity because people can work in small units. You don't need a big studio necessarily. And the other element that was very true was that through COVID, a lot of projects that had never been pitched before came to the markets and started being really welcomed by even the big studios. And the demand has been increasingly rising, and even if there is a contraction of the budgets, still there is so much demand, and the audience is global now. So you really have a content that can really, really, really be attractive for investment.
Carole?
Yeah, I would add also, you mentioned the budgets, but of course, partly the fact that there is a lot of co-production in animation is generated by the fact that budgets are significant, and it is very difficult to find that financing locally or even through regional funds. It might be possible in some of the big territories, of course, but we come from very small ones. So it's really working with other producers that are located elsewhere so that you can harness financing elsewhere is really the only way to do it. So it's definitely also that.
And we can, since we were talking about the COVID, because there was a spike of production at that time, especially in animation. Can you, because I won't say anything, but can you make a little, I don't know, portrait of the actual situation of animation in Europe? Is it good for now? Is it a good industry? Tell me all about it.
In the audience, there are some of the big players of the animation in Europe, so they should answer, and they may jump in the conference and talk a little bit about their perspective. But there is definitely an increase of territorial opportunities. We see a demand of training initiatives, and they come both at the local level, regionally, by joining forces. I mean, probably France has the most well-known example. Angoulême became, a remote region that didn't have a very strong film identity, became the epicenter of animation production in France, and that came through the generation of hubs of training and schools, and of course public incentives that must be stabilized. And this is happening even in countries like Poland. It's happening in places like Latvia. In Italy, we got an increase of producers and professionals working in animation. They moved from less than 1,000 to 5,000 in less than 3 years. These are numbers that are shocking. Now, there is a bubble that we don't want to pop up, but we are aware that the demand of the platforms is very high, and there is a very strong capacity of using animation as a language. It's not just a genre. So now you see more often documentaries using animation and creating very interesting experiments in terms of aesthetics, And of course, I think we all are aware that thanks to the cases of successful stories, the animation is not anymore perceived as cinema or TV for kids, but is really generating massive interest in the adult audience. And teenagers are marrying very strong content as well. So it is in a moment of golden age. The concern is, can we keep the pace of this demand, or are we just training too many people and then at one point the market will be saturated? At the moment, it's still going okay. So we have to look at what are the possible additional sectors where animation can do great work. And here we open the massive, content of education, even medical content and video games for, neurological training and other, segments that maybe we discuss later.
Yeah, sorry. Virginie, I understood that especially in Wallonia, there was like, the animation, the industry is rising.
Yes, yes. We receive so much projects right now in animation. To give you some figures, we invest about 1.3 million per year for years in animations. And right now, so in 2023, we invest 3.5 million, which is more than half of our total budget in One Image. So right now we have to be very attentive to keep a right balance between live action and animation, because as we are an economic fund, the animation projects are, of course, very interesting for the industry. So if we have to choose between a live action and an animation project, we are going to choose the animation project, because it is important for a large team of studios. And also, regarding the commercial potential of these projects, the public is large, the audience is international, so it's very interesting for a fund like us. So yes, the increase is very, very important, and it concerns both the series and the future films in animation.
Carole?
Yeah, I don't know if I can really say anything about the European state of animation in general. It's still such a diverse environment, and I think, partly it even depends on policy changes sometimes on how the animation industry is faring in different countries. So it would probably be better to ask someone from the observatory, for example, this sort of more overall question. But what I would say for us applies locally and probably in a lot of other countries too, is that same as for Wallimage. In Luxembourg, the submissions have been consistent, and the studios are faring well. Even though, of course, I know that especially the bigger studios for them it must be difficult, considering that energy prices are on the rise, etc. So there's a real challenge to manage the higher cost of living, etc. But having said that, for us at the fund, a few years ago, we also started funding more XR, for example, which also requires the contribution of either animation as a service or a co-production with an animation production company. And so we also actively try to diversify, let's say, the offer that's there on the market, kind of from our side. And like you said, all these various avenues that studios can have, where perhaps they can diversify their stream of income a little bit in case, let's say, the public funding is fluctuating or demand is so large that you may not be so sure that your project will get selected at the next round because it's so competitive. So you do try to strike a balance and make sure that the market has enough, or that your stakeholders have enough avenues that they can rely on, which can include more than just doing the selective projects that come to us. But yeah, again, to get an overall European perspective, it's hard from a national fund's point of view, I think, to comment on that.
I mean, also, it's fair to say that the European market is experiencing a lot of merging, and they come both from, the big global groups and even among states. There are countries like France, which has an incredible strength in animation, and so they can generate connection and acquisition of smaller companies in other countries. So definitely it's an interesting, turning point in our business. And I think at the moment, the states where there is a very strong investment in animation are able to negotiate differently the rules. And as you know, there is the usual question of, the quotas of the market and what level of demand each state makes for the animation product, and how can we make a more protective policy for the, nationally generated animation. That can create the conditions for better investment. But me being an Italian, it's a very delicate phase in our country where we didn't get what we expected, and there is a big negotiation also in other countries. France, for instance, guaranteed that quota, and this gives the producers that are looking at a 5-year investment a certainty of not being left alone in the middle of the project, which is, I think, a necessity for any level and any scale of project in animation.
If I
yes, of course,
something,
Virginie. Yes.
Even if the number of projects is very important right now, we have to admit that the business model is still difficult to reach for a studio. So it's a very difficult business, even right now, with a lot of projects produced.
Yeah, Carole?
Yeah, and just because I feel like we have been talking about opportunities and platforms and return on investment, etc. And of course, you mustn't forget that, at least for us as a public fund, you don't just want to fund commercially, like projects that are of commercial interest. You also want to fund the artists and the creators that are behind it. So. And there, some of these opportunities, of course, do not come along so easily. And of course, with investment obligations or whatever, you can try to facilitate that. But you also depend on your government for that, and whether they are willing to impose it and to what extent. But yeah, it's not just about the commercial viability as well. You also have to make sure that whatever, and about the next generation that's coming, and how the studios will be able to support them. So.
I think that, in Europe there is an awareness now around the power of intellectual property. You see it happening at all levels, at the markets for film, but also the book fairs. There is definitely this search for original content. And even the smallest publishing company is looking for talent, maybe by gathering, illustrators from, art schools. Once you get this significant impact on the IP, then animation is the place to be, because you really generate a consistent program to exploit the material, but also to grow with your audience. That's why I think we're all very protective when we talk about market for animation, because it is a very strong, sort of cultural hub for the community that generates the content, but also for the big changing community of audience members that, as we see, grow with their favorite IP. And the other element is that these IPs, when they are centered to the point, they have no limit in time. We have great cases of content like Barba Papa, which, as we know, was a very unique ecological, preview of our world, completely utopian, has been redone in 3D. So you change a little bit the technology, you refresh a little bit the voices, but at the end of the day, the original IP is still incredibly valuable today. So that is what is very true in Europe. We really have this facility of getting to train more talent and get the content really to a high stage of performance.
And I have a question about the co-productions. How do they translate really in real life? I mean, when you talk about helping financially a movie with the incentive and other, to have a co-production, you need to both of the country working, or is it just about money? How the co-production really works? I'm especially asking the two found, but
I mean, Luxembourg, I guess, is a bit of a special territory because we are so small that we do not have, let's say, we depend on Benelux for distribution, for example, so we don't have any local distributors that could invest. And we also don't have any sales agents because they're in France, which puts us and the audiovisual industry in a very specific situation, which we try to compensate for by with the funds that we give. So for that reason, in Luxembourg alone, we can't just look at the commercial viability just because the market is too tiny. I mean, we also, in terms of audience size, if we look at audience numbers, Luxembourg alone would, you know, it's a drop in the ocean. So that's not I wouldn't say that could never be our main criterion. For us, it's very much about having a viable industry and also making these co-productions and this international work possible, because I think in a way that's also part of our DNA. We are small, we're at the center of Europe, and we only thrive thanks to how we cooperate with our neighbors, and I think that is also part of the DNA of our film industry. So at least for us, we don't only look at the commercial side of things, but of course, if you have from the other territories that you bring along, the better the project looks in terms of letters of commitment or sales. If that's your question, I'm not quite sure, then the better it is for the project. And I guess very often the likelier it is, if the script and the Bible, etc., are good and get liked by the selection committee, the higher the chances are that it will get selected. Yes, I mean, it will improve the chances of funding for sure.
Yes, it was that, but also that for Wallonia, for example, from Belgium, when you give money to a project as a co-production, do you make them, there has to be some studio from Belgium that works on the project, or creative that works on the project. How does it really translate?
Yes, to answer your question, I think actually the main point is the money, because to produce an animation project is very difficult to reach enough financing sources. So yes, at the very beginning, if the Belgian is part of the game, it's because we invest money. And to obtain our money, you have to work with Walloon studios. So that's the beginning of the story. But right now, we have, of course, talented skills in Wallonia, and sometimes there is co-production without a fund like us, just because of the specific skills of talented Walloon people. But the first key is the money and the way you locate your expenses between the different regions.
And if we can suggest, maybe it's good for the audience here to look at what is happening in terms of European film funding. I mean, look at the associations like Cineregio. They work on dividing funds that can provide both an investment for talent, and so in a way they approach mostly the phase of development and pre-production, and those that instead facilitate the investment of public money for service companies that are based in those regions. And so there is a combination of regional and national fund that can provide support in various phases of the work. And of course, animation also requires, national dubbing, which includes the possibility of generating interesting packages nationally for the talent. So now you are going through a larger scope of work and investment in your own national ecosystem. I mean, I see here, I saw she's not going to be happy that I call her in, but like Enrica Capra is a minority co-producer of a film that won in 2022 the European Film Academy as the best animated feature, which was Interdit aux chiens Sebastian is Italian, and that is a great case of European co-production in stop motion with an incredibly, European story, very local, but extremely, successfully globally. And it was a very long, complex process also to generate the full, package of co-production. But at the end, it paid back because the film is traveling now, and it got, not only showcased in every main festival globally, but it also generated curiosity around stop motion. And what we see now is that, there are very interesting new upcoming talents from the film schools that are looking at stop motion as a way to generate content. So, it's very expensive, it takes time, but it's totally worth it, right?
Right, and I think there will be the key sentence of this panel.
Because I'm hopeful.
Yeah, and we will say it at the end again, but yeah. But before I allow the room to ask questions, I have one more question. It's about the future. How do you see the future of animation with a lot of things going on? There's a lot of issues that are coming on. Technological issues like artificial intelligence, or even ecological issues, and talking about sustainability, diversity issues. So how do you think animation can face and will, be on the road with all those issues?
Okay, I'll take the sustainability one because, as you know, it's my obsession from quite a while. Not only ecological sustainability, which though has been generating, more responsible awareness among producers. In France, EcoProd has been, testing real, protocols for, in a way, making a more sustainable practice of production and post-production of animation. There is, mostly in France, a very strong debate over how much it's costing in terms of emissions to the planet, the transfer of data. Because we always think of the plastic bottles, but that's over. We know that those are out of, not even out of question. But let's look at how much we spend for the planet energy in terms of the way we pollute by transferring data. And we are totally in a global system where I saw films being made with non-stop Zoom calls among teams. How can we make it more sustainable and less impactful? This is happening. There are a lot of regions in European countries that are experimenting the so-called green protocols for animation. And of course, there is something that I love to say because it is something that the data is confirming. More than live action, animation is among the variety of, production hubs for the film industry is much more inclusive. There is a very strong female participation, at least in the short film production, not only this panel, but I think it speaks for a lot of other communities where women are running production companies. A lot of female directors are participating to the best, selection in the world. And it is also inclusive because it gives voice also to the LGBTQ+ community. And it is, if you look at some examples, for instance, the way that animation can handle delicate communities like the autistic community and how much the content can be generated within the community are typical cases of how much it is a language that facilitates, authenticity and communication among creators. The element that is awaiting is, of course, the usual closing phrase, another one, I'll throw you on the floor. It's there is no film industry, there is no planet, and we have to all change the way that the organization is happening. Studios are now getting more used to use only audio calls instead of video calls, and the share of the document is facilitated by creating virtual studios that basically acknowledges all the workers in the same production to be having personal access to the content instead of spending hours of live connection in the hub. There are ways that of course, the artificial intelligence is a topic that maybe you ladies can tackle, because that's a trick, and that is going to change the forced labor and our capacity to generate more work, but it can also make it very efficient.
to answer you, Nevina. So as a human being, we know that in AI is right now, the changes are right now. And to be honest, when I look at the project that we co-produce, of course AI helps, but it's still not the huge implementation of the generative AI that we can suppose now. So, to be honest, I'm a little bit stressed about the future and the next few months for our studios, because it's a very big opportunity, but also a potential issue to deal with, and I think they have to react very quickly and very efficiently right now, and I'm not sure it's already the case for our studios. I don't know if you have the same concept.
I don't know if I want to start elaborating on AI. I also find it very stressful, and I think everybody does to a certain extent, and we can't even foresee how it will impact everybody's work from basically tomorrow or today. So that's a hard one, and I think we could be here for hours talking about all these issues. I mean, the problems that you mentioned, whether it's, yes, having the skills required to deal with this new world in terms of AI assisted or even generated content, but also, yeah, how that impacts the labor market, etc. As well as whether it's representation and diversity or having to become more ecologically sustainable. I think these are all no-brainers. We all know that we have to do that, and we all know that we have a role to play, and I think we're all still figuring out how to do it. I think that as a European industry, there seems to be a lot of momentum. You can see it at festivals and markets. To work together to tackle some of these big issues is something we should embrace. I think that's a good thing, in spite of all the negativity that it can generate sometimes. What I would say, perhaps on diversity overall, when I look at the projects that get pitched at MIFA, for example, or Cartoon, to me, I've been working at the fund now for 10 years. I think over the past 10 years, things have improved. They are not where they should be. I think we can agree on that. And perhaps also because animation, in a way, has almost a special role to play there, because they reach audiences when they are so young already. So when we talk about representation on screen, of course, when I talk about the people who work in animation in the room, you really touch people at the age when all these things are still in motion, and when you can influence people to a certain extent or more than when they're already an adult. So in that sense, I think there are some issues that perhaps we need to look at in even more detail when it comes to the animation industry and representation, authenticity, etc. But I think it's also an opportunity, because it's a way animation can help tackle very complex and difficult subjects like that in a very playful manner. So we should also be hopeful when it comes to that. And the same for technology. If we look at, let's say, game engine adaptation, for example, the animation industry really already had a head start compared to some live action companies. So I would say overall, we're probably all late when it comes to adapting to technology, but I would say the animation industry is still a step ahead compared to some of the other industry players, at least from what I can see.
If I can add one thing that Carol said, it's very important that we go back to the awareness that public broadcasting in these conversation has a role to play. And, you know, okay, the existence of the platform has raised many possibilities, but one certainty that we all have is that mostly for the under 18, audience members and the underrepresented communities, guaranteeing a very strong presence of the, producing capacity of public broadcasting and animation can lead us to more content that has no other will but, we would say to build a European strong sense of identity, presence, and voice, but also to lead, the next generation of creators to higher standards of the questions that we ask. I mean, I think this goes to the very, bottom line. Animation can really have this incredible power of being a language that everybody, understands and wants, and can really lead you to much more awareness on the big issues of life. And today, I think it seems very philosophical, but at the end of the day, look at how much a film like Flea changed the awareness of our position on even engaging on the memory of war in individuals. How much we can really tell stories differently by using the symbolic representation of animation and talking really to the core bones of the problems. So that is, I think, what we all love about engaging in projects that seem completely impossible financially, but then you discover that you actually can speak many voices and reach the hearts of many.
And I totally agree with Carol when you say that it could be roundtable in itself with just those issues. But if I'm asking that as well, is because we can imagine that each country will have its own reaction, its own rules, its own laws on those issues. So what I'm thinking is, in a case of a co-production, so 2 or more countries being associated on one project, can those issues, I mean, like AI, I think every country will have its own relationship with AI. It can be a problem for a co-production if countries totally disagree.
Of course, it can be a problem, and that's why I think we need a European approach when it comes to this, because even when how you deal with IP and AI, if every country starts, you could be in theory, be in a situation where in one country the IP is handled completely differently than in another one, and I think that would make co-productions extremely difficult, and not just difficult, but it will have wide-reaching consequences. So I think we really need to look at it and also work with the European EU stakeholders on this to make sure that there's, I think, a European framework to help us navigate co-productions in this new environment, when it comes to AI at least. And I think in terms of ecological sustainability, that's also where we are going. Hopefully one day we'll have a European calculator, or there will be a magical solution to make all these calculators compatible for co-productions, because that's already a challenge today sometimes.
Yes, regarding the intellectual property or the rules for sustainability, we need a global approach, it's true. But when we talk about the generative AI and the fact that some tasks are going to be automated, I think it comes from the market itself, because all the studios are going to implement that on the way they produce the projects. So I think we are not, so the rules are not the base. The base is from the market and the technological task and way of producing. And maybe the balance between the automatization and the creativity is the real challenge right now for the studios.
Nevina?
Yeah, no, because I'm sure that the audience has questions, and actually, if you have suggestions, throw them at us. But I mean, clearly, the entire generation of original content, intellectual property that has value and can be global by being extremely local. At the same time, even the talent that can do pre-production and generate the content is is fantastic for Europe. We have this possibility. Look at all the feature films or the TV series that have been really developed without the necessity of being commercial. They became very powerful also with the audience. And the return of the audience to the movie theater to watch animation is real. And we know that it is happening. And if the content, of course, there is always the fear that the next Disney movie may be a flop and therefore the entire animation goes down, but you see the opposite. So I personally think that we need to keep investing in development and probably expand our ability to invest in a stronger European development, which for animation, of course, includes not only the screenwriters, but also the artistic director of the projects, the directors, and even those smaller independent studios that are really making the first jump and they're looking for talent. You mentioned cartoon media. Look at how much happens at Annecy or at Cartoon Forum, where we really see these incredible projects focusing on very strong topics. And sometimes they're targeting kids, in the bridge age between 5 and 7. I also think that there is something that we must look. I mean, we are talking about European content, but the European audience, like the rest of the world, has been looking at content coming from Japan, South Korea, or Latin America. And we have also funding schemes like the Ibermedia Plus and other funds that can combine some European funding with international funding. So I think that there are possibilities. It's definitely a challenge, I think, for the funds to be faster and more consistent, as you both said. And this is the real question we all face every day. I mean, look at the tax credit policy. Sometimes he's super excited, gets number on steroids, and 2 years later they drop. This does not support the system, and that has to change.
Thank you to all the three of you, but you're not finished yet because I'm looking at the room now, and if you have question, yes, this amazing guy is giving you a microphone. No, yes?
I have a question for Nevina. You mentioned that sustainability is a very strong topic. And you also mentioned a carbon calculator, especially for animation. And you also were talking about the company. Can you tell the name?
There is a protocol in France called EcoProd that has been approved by, the Producers Association, the minister, and so on. And EcoProd has been testing, the application of the sustainability program for the animation. And there are simple solutions that seem very simple, but it took years to get there. Like the way that you can, for instance, convert the heat that post-production generate, when we have big computers that are processing 3D feature films, for instance, that has been experimented in Paris. They succeeded in keeping the heat and turning it into the energy that warmed up the Paris public pool. So, you suddenly use something that is out there, but you challenge it through a different use. There are many other possibilities that you can develop, and one knowledge that is now shared, and it's true, it's a no-brainer, but we better talk instead of taking it for granted, is that most of the facilitation that you can have for production companies that work in animation come from the civic society. You can restore the building where you're living in by using renewable energies, and so you use, in a way, money that is not for film, but you can change your ability to get more money from film because now you're a sustainable company. Let's be aware, there is a lot of greenwashing out there. There is a lot of, fake certifications, but also, there are the directives of the EU Parliament that say, let's also look at the fake, greenwashing and the greenwashing policies. So I think that Europe has a voice now, is really leading the research for a more, consistent transformation of the way we work, the way we produce. And if you look at countries like India, with whom we do a lot of co-production in animation, they're they're working really seriously on the renewable energies. And sometimes you think about India, you think that there is a lot of conflict existing there, but they're taking it very seriously because the temperatures outside the studios are unsustainable. So this is something that we all, and it is true, it's not a European issue, it is a global issue, and it's really changing the way that we can affect. There is a debate over, can we give more money to those that have been even more sustainable? And this is something that maybe in next year's Cannes we can debate, if the lobbying brought us somewhere.
Maybe not. Thank you. We need time for another question. Yes, there was, yeah.
Hi, since you mentioned about India, I am from India, and my next question happens to be quite topical to the whatever you. So your funds in Valimaj and Luxembourg specifically, are they targeted only at Europe, or do they also encourage collaborations with India, would be my question, because we are in final stage discussion with 2 studios in Luxembourg, which was a surprise to us, though we have worked extensively on co-productions with all the rest of Europe. So I wanted to know, is there any special encouragement, or even would we be treated equal with Europe, or is it not worth it for us to pursue extensively about this possibility? You know?
I start, okay? So in Wallonia, you need just a Belgian producer. So it can be with India, it's okay. You can obtain Walimage. But the problem is that you cannot obtain the tax shelter mechanism, because to obtain it, you need to be a European project. And if you cannot reach the tax shelter mechanism, Walimage, it's not enough. So it's possible for us, but it doesn't work.
Stories.
Yeah. I mean, there are some, I mean, yeah, it's not really about the content. No. It's about the production workflow and
the financing, co-production.
Yeah, I can add to that. I mean, for us, the condition is that you have a Luxembourg co-producer who lodges the application with us. That's the first condition. And in theory, of course, you can co-produce with any country, but by design, it is much easier when you do it with European companies, because you can do it under the so-called convention, you know? So you have a treaty that applies, which facilitates and actually stipulates a number of very specific criteria on how these co-production structures can work, which doesn't mean that co-producing with other territories in third countries, as we call them, are impossible, but they're a lot harder and they're a lot more volatile often because of currency issues, etc. But it's not impossible. But the story is not, that's the artistic side of things, and that's something we look at once the project has been submitted. But here we're really talking about the financing structure of the project, and sometimes even the structure of the company, or how the companies and how that matches. But that's why I'm saying it's easier when it's always easier when it's with other European countries, but it's not impossible when it's not.
And if you can add, consider that a lot of European countries are individually developing co-production treaties with single countries that are not European, and this leads often to, you know, facilitation to open spin-off in a European country, and that would open the possibility to be beneficial of a European co-production. So actually, we saw it in Japan, it's happening in many countries, and consider also that the European financial scheme is already open through Eurimage to Canada and to other countries. So you can actually generate inter-stream bridges. That's why it's a perfect co-production hub. I mean, it's really the co-production language.
Thank you. I think we have time for one last question. I think there was a young man here. Yes. And before you ask, no? No? Okay, cool. You go.
My question was similar to him, and I wanted to know, like, which of your organizations has, like, co-productions with Latin America?
Yeah, I mean, I would just repeat myself, but I want to add that we also have a scheme where we focus more specifically on smaller budget productions, because very often with third countries you also just have the budgets that don't necessarily match. So maybe it's easier if you come and talk to me after the panel, because I think we're running out of time, but I'm happy to give you more information or come to the stand and we'll do it there.
Yeah, but you can quickly, Ibermedia includes co-production with Spain, Portugal and Italy. And you can, of course, apply other co-production schemes. So look at either the European Regional Funds Network or the European Film Commissions. They can be the facilitators, and each national funding has specific additional agreements. So it's a very rich potential. The question is, would that be enough? And that is where you guys have to come with new ideas.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Nevina, thank you, Carol, thank you, Virginie. It was a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you, thank you. Let's all go to Annecy in a month, in a week.